different software packages that are out there. I've done my research. We brought in the folks from Edgenuity and met with the administrative team. The original presentation, we looked at a K-12 package. K-12 package, actually, Edgenuity had just purchased Compass Learning, and folks, I don't know if folks are familiar with Compass Learning. They're one of the national, or were one of the national providers for elementary curriculum. Edgenuity has brought them over. We're not really happy with that product yet, so we stayed away from it at this point in time. So looking at our budget, this year alone for tutorials, so students that need tutorial work, so that are out of school for a number of litany of different reasons, but needed some tutorial help, we spent close to $10,000 in providing tutors. We spent close to, with special ed and other things, close to $20,000 on summer school. What we've done is we've purchased 10 congruent licenses and the $650 a license. So 10 congruent licenses meaning 10 kids at any one time, not just 10 kids, but 10 kids at any one time. And we think this is going to be a great resource, again, looking at tutorial, looking at remediation, looking at kids that may be out for long-term illness or other things, to be able to fulfill some of that need at a cheaper cost. We're happy, again, that it aligns with the national and the New Hampshire standards, so our curriculums are in line. And I think eventually, once we get our teachers a little more comfortable with this product, I think you might see some blended learning going on. What I mean by that is, so what I might be doing in my science class, I'm then going to assign you this part to go home and watch on Edgenuity and pull up those lessons and do those lessons at home, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about more in class and get a little deeper. So it's not necessarily homework, but it's enriching what would typically maybe done in class, but doing that at home and then coming in and asking questions about it to be able to move deeper into a content area. So again, I'm just making you aware of this. I think this is going to be a very worthwhile investment for our middle high school at this time, in not only those areas, but potentially moving down the road. We need to stay current. Public education needs to stay current. I think this will allow us, as education moves forward, to, I'm not going to say individualize, I'm going to say individualize, not necessarily personalize. So you don't get to pick and choose, but if there's an option which may fit you, meaning if you need to take an economics class, and right now we use VLAX and some of those things, there are some electives classes, CT classes, it just gives us other options for kids for not only taking core content, but as I said, those other areas, whether it's remediation, tutorial, summer school, credit recovery, and I just think it's going to be a welcome addition for us to continue to move forward. I think we'll look as it continues to develop in the elementary school. As I said, the elementary school product we weren't happy with as it stands right now. So if you have questions regarding that before I move on.
How does that interact with VLAX? Because I know a lot of students have taken VLAX courses as an alternative learning. Does this supplement it, replace it?
It doesn't replace it. I think it sort of stands alongside with it. So if I'm taking a VLAX class like economics now, VLAX offers that curriculum. So Edgenuity has that, but what I really see that as a teacher saying, okay, so I've missed a month of school because of a illness. I broke my arm. The teacher could then go and assign me specific units or lessons from that economics class, and then I could go take those to stay current with my class. So I'm not taking the whole class, I could take bits and pieces. And again, I can blend that learning. You have the ability to take it online and take the online Edgenuity class. I don't see us using it for that at this point in time. I see those other places where it's going to be more useful.
Okay.
Does this replace anything, or is this something?
No, so it doesn't replace anything. Hopefully it's going to reduce those costs a bit. That's the overall.
And then, so it's 10 licenses, so any up to?
So 10 kids at a time.
Any 10 kids?
Any 10 kids at a time. And that, so you could be at home using it, as long as you weren't the 11th kid, you'd be all set.
And then projection for potential savings or justification with?
So if I'm spending $6,500, I've already saved, if I cover my tutorial line, half my tutorial line, I've almost covered the cost of the initial software.
Okay.
Right. And we can add, if we move into summer school, there's a process of adding license for summer school that are at a much cheaper rate. So if we had an extensive summer school or summer push, we could add more licenses there. And so we felt 10 would be a good number to start with and get a barometer of if that's enough, if that's more than we need or not enough, and then adjust as we move forward. But a good stepping up. Yes?
I'm going to make sure I have the notes right. You said middle and high, right? Because
The second page is the, yeah, you'll see it.
And what does a license cost?
$650. And we're getting, so it's $6,500. The next is the memorandum of understanding. and been working with Donna and Scott and Brenda with the highway garage. And as our bus fleet grows and our bus personnel grows, the highway department grows and their equipment and personnel grows, there's some concerns regarding safety in coming in and out of that building with heavy equipment. When we use that building, I think the town is really trying to get a handle on, not specifically us as an entity, but a lot of people come and go within the highway garage, seems at sort of nighttime and sometimes on the weekend, and trying to sort of limit that access to folks, and have come up with a memorandum of understanding that sort of sets the terms in which we use that location, because again, that is a town entity, it doesn't belong to the school. And one of the pieces that we talked about here was potentially building a shed, if you will, or a garage up next to our fleet, where our bus drivers have a place to go to in the morning. Right now, they go into the garage, and they were out sort of in the mechanics area. There's, again, safety concerns and liability. That's not the best place to have them, so we talked about moving them into the, what they call their lunchroom. The problem being with that, sometimes their lunchroom, they're having meetings, and in the wintertime, there's really no place for our folks to congregate, because they have to set up their bus, do their bus checks, let the bus warm up, and that could take anywhere from 25 minutes to 30 minutes, give or take, depending on the weather. And really, it's not appropriate for asking them to stand outside or stay into the cold bus, given temperatures. So we may, I'm actually looking at specifications now and numbers to bring you probably in June to look at what it may cost to put us a 20 by 20 garage on a slab, heat it. We have electricity there. We already have metered and tie into it, so that our drivers and our folks would have a place to go. We'd store our tools in cold storage in there as well. We do have some oil and fluids and things that we keep in a cabinet in the garage that we have access to. Right now, the only person who has access is our bus transportation director. And so if there was a weekend trip and she wasn't there and somebody needed fluids, there was no way for someone to really get into access to that garage. So part of it's accessibility, part of it's safety, and I think there is a piece of it in which we need to have, if we're going to be there, have our own sort of area in which we can be without disturbing or interfering in what's going on the town side. So this is, I think, probably the final draft of the memorandum of understanding. This was put together by the town and the town attorney. I give it to you for review and or questions.
I'll open it up to the board. Does the board have any questions for Russ on this?
How many bus drivers do we currently have?
Brenda?
Total of 11. Not daily, we have 6 out daily, but up to 11.
They'll rotate through based on timing.
What type of agreement will be done if the school puts forth money on town property and builds a building, like a lease or?
Yeah, so I would ask for sort of a lease that we would be able to lease a space and understanding that that's our space. My understanding, and we have a slab, if you will, a paved slab where we paid to put our buses on. I don't think there was ever a lease, but it was sort of an understanding we put the money towards that. Again, we have a metered electrical and outlets for our diesel buses to be hooked up in the wintertime, and so we pay for that. I don't think there's any real terms, but I would think moving forward, if we're going to have a memorandum of understanding, that we would also going to have a facility there, if you will, that we have an understanding that that's our facility. And how long it's
I think that's just important from sitting through many 1941 building discussions in New London over the school and watching the town wanting it and the school saying no and issues. So I think some type of lease yes, would protect the school once they make that investment, and the highway department doesn't say that's a great place for us to park 2 more trucks now.
Right, 2 years from now. Yeah. Great.
Any other questions concerning this? Please do.
Brenda, anything you want to add to that? You were involved in all those conversations.
You want some information as to why it would be beneficial to the department?
Sure.
Just to give you an idea, the town is currently beginning a 2-phase project to build their cold storage area. Once that happens, the cold storage bins that we currently use, that we have access to, are going to go away. So I'll lose a place to keep all of my snow removal equipment, my cones for training, my spare tires, things like that, lights. And so that is on its way out as well. So it's kind of planning ahead for that, to have the space for that.
Thank you, Brenda.
Okay.
With on that, no. And lastly, as Jody mentioned, and we'll probably hit it on in the Facilities Committee update, but May 20th, inviting the community to Sunapee Central Elementary School, 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. We are going to open the doors, give you tours, guided tours if you want one, give you sort of points of interest, let you, like I said, let you just go and take a look at that building. What we learned from the survey that was given last November was that probably more than 80% of the people who were surveyed, over 900 people that were surveyed, hadn't been in that building in over 5 years. And so I think it's important for people to get in that building and take a look at that. That's it.
Thank you very much. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Holden?
No.
Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which are committee updates. CIP, that would be Brian and Jesse. I'll throw it to either one of you two to update us.
Do you want to run through that list of
We can do that.
projects?
So there is a list in your packet. Sort of an ongoing list that I put together. An ongoing list that I put together when I first came to the district, and it just talks about some things that the CIP committee has put together. It's not that somebody from High School goes to elementary school and talks about district-wide. Things on there from the redoing the gym floors, the paving of the parking lot, things that have been done, LED light project, the membrane roof, family consumer science room that was originally proposed, the art room renovation that was proposed and was put on hold. And so it just sort of lists out the project so we have an ongoing record. And I try to indicate what was done, when it was completed, and what that cost was. Do you want to hit the big?
So really, there weren't any, we walked through the buildings April 15th. We spent, I don't know, was it 4 hours? 2 hours going through each building. There weren't any major concerns, except with the elementary school, which I think it's probably gotten to the point where we have to look at doing something along the lines of access control, square footage allotment per students. Unfortunately, there were instances where there's a one-on-one with a teacher and a student that effectively is being held in a closet because that's the space that's available. So I know there'll be certainly pushback from the community about spending money on a building when our enrollment is as it is, but I don't think it relieves us of the obligation to provide a safe environment for the children we do have in the school. So I think there's something that has to be done there, and I know there's the second committee looking at just the elementary school will have to be working on it. The other thing we discussed was the paving of the parking lot out back.
And we'll talk about that in action items.
Okay, but overall, the facilities, the staff do a phenomenal job of keeping the facilities up, considering the elementary school was built in 1916, was it? That seems to...
Jonathan, number?
1927. So considering the length of time we've been in that building, the facility is Mr. Royce does a phenomenal job over there of keeping it up and running and in nice shape.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see all of it, to go into that depth, and having moved here almost 2 years ago, a fifth grader in the building, I was aware the first time I walked in that there were some interesting elements to the space, and so to get the full tour, but it's pretty impressive how it has been maintained, and it was really informative and a good use of time to get some more insight. I agree with everything you said.
Thank you, guys. Does the board have any questions for the committee? What they've seen and reported? Hearing none, we'll move on to the Sunapee Central Elementary School facility for which I and Jesse are on, so Jesse, I'll throw that to you.
Yeah, it was, specifically to elementary school, it was informative to see space under hallways, space under stairwells, and hallways being critical learning space. So that was very insightful for me. I had some sense of that with having had a student there for 1 year, but I didn't appreciate some of the classroom size constraints and some of the space usage that has had to happen over a long period of time. So it was a real eye opener for me to have that insight. Definitely some challenges there.
Russ, do you want to add anything? You were in the meeting.
Yes, so I think we've talked a little bit about next step, and one of the pieces that's really important from as Brian said, is a safety standpoint. Right? It's care and safety, things that I wrote there: care, safety, community, respect, educational success, and that's sort of a focus. It needs to be a focus of that building. But bringing in the fire department, bringing in the police department, we had Homeland Security, running through ed specifications, running through our insurance company, and having an understanding of what needs to be done in that building to bring us where it needs to be, just from a safety standpoint. And really, what we're talking about is safety there. I know last year in May, June, around this time, I brought forward. We talked about a proposal with Dan Bisson. Dan Bisson was from Team Design and is now working with Harriman. We talked about having them come back in updating the work that was done back in 2006, 2007. It's about 10 years old now. We brought Dan on as a consultant, and we set some money aside, not knowing what the scope of what project would be. So we have some money that's been set aside. We've held it over. And moving forward, I think it would be great to bring Dan back on board and update that work. And so really looking at, from fire, police, security, educational specification, insurance purposes, what are the needs of that building? So we sort of had those 10 years ago. I think those things have all changed in that time period. What does that now look like coming forward? And so that would be, I think, something that I think we talked to the committee that may be a good use at this point in time to get that information and just have that conversation and get that information on the table.
So as a new committee member, recently elected to the board, I'm looking at this as we don't have what do we need today from a safety standpoint, beyond other interests and uses of the building, just strictly from a safety and care of students and staff. And understanding that there has been money that was allotted prior and set aside for this, I'm really interested in seeing those funds, that work being completed, so that we can have an understanding of what really needs to be done to get us to where we need to be now, and then we can have a broader discussion with the community about what the findings were from the experts, because we've had, Homeland and Fire and our insurance company, they've all weighed in that there's things that need to be addressed. So I'm interested in just knowing just starting from a safety standpoint, but I also like that this work was started prior and there's funds already allotted for it. So I'm gonna push that we complete that work, so we have a 2017 snapshot, and then we can decide what, if anything, we want to do in response to that from what the experts are saying.
Do any of the other board members have any questions or issues or concerns for Jesse or I on this? Are you going to need authorization?
I would. So at that time, we spoke again May, June. We didn't have figures back. We got the figure back. It was about a $40,000 figure. Speaking with the board chair at the time, we set aside, we encumbered the money from last year's budget. So we've had money set aside. Again, we paid Dan a couple bucks as he came and consulted on a couple of those meetings with us. So there was
about $3,000?
Somewhere in that ballpark. So there was 30 plus, I don't know the exact figure, somewhere 35,000, somewhere in that ballpark, that we have encumbered money. And at the end of June this year, if that money's not spent, this is going to go back into the fund balance. So if it makes sense, then just authorizing me to reach out to Dan and ask him to finish the scope of the work that he presented. And the price that he came back with, because remember I negotiated the price with him, he started at 40, I believe I got him down to somewhere around 32, to just give us that sort of scope of the work like you're talking about.
Yeah, so I'm aware that my encouraging us to move forward to utilize that, we don't have a set figure from him.
Right.
So I'm acknowledging that. It sounds like they're gonna be very close, but we're looking at, the remainder of that, if it's gonna be more than that 40,000, more than the 35, if there's even a $5,000 discrepancy, that's a different figure to consider to complete this work, where we're able to utilize the money that was set aside. So I'm acknowledging that we're probably pretty close from my understanding. I'm not being 100% exact. That said, I feel strongly that that work should be completed so that we have an update from 10 years ago of what we really need to do to meet the standard. So.
April,
So,
your
I just
question?
want to talk a little bit about the history. So when this came up last year, the decision, the reason why we pushed it back was, in the past, we spent the money and then it was voted down. Not once, but how many times, Russ? Twice or 3 times?
A couple, yeah, 3.
3 times. So we spent $40,000 and then once, twice, 3 times the voters said no. So I thought our decision last year was we were going to hold the money but put it on the ballot so that the voters could give an appetite of whether or not it would pass before we went ahead and spent another $40,000. So I don't think we did that, though.
I think that the discussions were along the road.
Yeah.
Am I mistaken, where we were going to, because part of the plan was having a second access, and I thought the second access was going to go on the ballot, or was discussion of having that go on the ballot, and that being the bellwether to whether people would support a change to the school.
Well, I know we did the survey as a result of it.
The survey came out as a result of that.
So that was sort of the first step, but I thought that we still had a couple more steps before we spent the money a second
So
time.
this wouldn't be hiring a firm to come up with a proposal.
Right, no, it's
Right?
just his
It's-
evaluation.
yes, yes.
But what we clarified last year is, of the 10 years ago one that we spent the $40,000 on, we still haven't fixed those problems. Right, so we know that there's some things on that list that was recommended then that
Right,
still haven't
but
been
we need to
corrected.
update that list to know exactly
To know
what
when.
to update. Right. So based upon code changing, engineering changing, ed specifications, police and fire, insurance, upping that to know what it is to go back, I think is what you're saying, so we know what it's targeting.
I'm only advocating for whether any of it's been done or none of it's been done. It's from 10 years ago. I'm interested from a safety standpoint, not looking at any. I'm not the expert for the changes. That's not my purview. I'm just strictly trying to be responsible of, we need to know what things need to be done now, and if this is a way to utilize the funds for however they are originally intended, if this is congruent or not. I feel as, a board member or a taxpayer, we need to know what we need to address. It's fine to have, if there's a follow-on, it would be nice to have. I'm only going in the smaller scope of strictly from a safety standpoint and meeting the standards for that safety. So if that's a possibility for the board to consider it, that's what I'm going to advocate for. Nothing beyond that. We need that updated. We can't be going off a 2007 list, and when things may or may not have changed for expectations of standard, insurance rates, and those other factors. Just reducing it just to what do we need to do.
And I don't disagree, but my concern is, if here in 2017 we spend $40,000 and then it's another 6 years before we can get it approved, we'll again have to spend another $40,000. And am I misunderstanding? I know that there's certainly, toward the facility, I'm well aware of a lot of the things that need to be done, but if it was an immediate safety issue, we would have to do it. We would be mandated by the state during the inspections, or...
Not necessarily. And I'm going to just be very careful with my words.
Right.
But we live in a very small community, and I think there are things that we recognize as being some issues that we have said, okay, if we're going to move in this direction, let's not put money into something that's going to be undone in a year or two to address some of the safety issues. Do I think we have some issues that need to be addressed? Yes. Do I feel like we need to continue to be diligent regarding some of the issues we're aware about? Yes, and I think we are. But it doesn't mean that they should stay that way for another
Right.
10 years.
Well, my concern is just, rather than take that $40,000 on the investment, if we took the $40,000 and corrected the issues that we've already identified,
I think then
Would that
you
then-
could potentially doing something and being undone. So if there's a step beyond this, if we're going anything beyond this, and again, I understand Jesse's just looking at here and now and safety, but if there are other opportunities to move forward, you're gonna potentially do something and have it undone.
But if the decision of the town is to build a new school, it would be the same situation, this $40,000 would be undone, correct?
But based upon the survey, it
Not.
wasn't a new school, it was a renovation addition to the existing structure. Because that was the focus, if you will, or sort of the will of the school the will of the community based upon the survey.
So I was looking at it with that context, with my short career here on our board, but I'm looking at the feedback. I remember doing the survey. And the community has spoken of what their preference would be, and I appreciate that. It'd be great if we can consider doing something on a scale that meets all of everybody's wishes of what that would be. That could be something down the road. I'm just interested in scaling it back, having walked through and been made aware of the different advice that we've gotten. I think it just bringing it back to strictly from a safety standpoint. To me, that doesn't have anything to do with whether we do a major renovation or not. We have to, at the very least, do what we need to do to be compliant and in good standing. What that looks like, somebody's going to have to tell us. But I'm not looking at this as a larger project. That might not be a fair way to look at it, and we might never agree on it. But I'm just looking at it as we got to have somebody give us something from 10 years ago isn't good enough for now for our kids and our staff if there's a potential risk with, the way the facility is run. Whether it's something we've done and it's been good enough, that can be marked up to grit or care or longer view. But I think we need someone from a neutral stance to say, you need to do this, so that we can react to it and start to decide, okay, now, because we'll never make light of spending $40,000 on anything. We can go round and round like the last meeting on the parking lot. We can have a long discussion about those $40,000, so its convenience is the same number. But on this one, it just doesn't. To me, it doesn't feel, having invested the time in the subcommittee, it just feels like we have to do this. So that's my stance and what I'm, sharing with the board.
It might be good to show the video of the school that we put together.
I think it'd be a good opportunity to queue it up, sure. John. While John queues that up, is there anything else that the board wants to talk about? Just get a couple of minutes
So,
relative to this.
yeah, this is the one that we asked about. There's not a lot of competition, right? That I know we selected this guy because he did it before, but there's not a lot of other options out there, or
So you could go to another option, but someone's starting from scratch. So I think it was looking at the consistency of having a guy that did it, understands it, not only has been through the whole process, right? Instead of somebody coming in and saying, okay, here.
right. And do you think that there might be more a more persuasive argument if we used a different person the second time around to say not one but two?
So I'm gonna go again, stick with addressing the concerns based upon police, fire, educational specifications. I would hope
They're all the same.
they're all the same. I'm just using knowledge that we hopefully have working here.
I'm going to ask the board to down in the front row. Pull the screen down.
There was weird steeping in my class, which means the wheelchair accessible stuff. A couple of
John, closest one.
Yes. That's my man. If I can just first just thank John for his videography.
Great guitar playing, John.
That's excellent, excellent. I like how you learn. So I think it's a nice picture.
Opportune time to show it. I'm gonna throw it back to Jesse and April as they were in conversation right now. They want to continue to have a dialogue about where we're at.
Like I said, my concern is just making sure that we're not spending the money to then again have this discussion again in 6 years. And I like the idea of the open house, and I'm not sure if maybe we want to wait till after the open house to try and gauge another appetite. Not that I don't think that it has an educational value, I just want to make sure that we're not, again, throwing it out and not being able to use it.
I think part of what we talked about at the committee level was just the due diligence phase. We've got information that I think we had a report from '86, we had a report from '04, '06, '07. We had lots of different what they called schemes back then as to how building could look. Things have changed since '07, '06 to '17, and I do think that we have kicked the can down the road since 2007 and have been putting paint and carpet and things of that nature, but not really addressing the true issue, and that's the functionality of the building. So that's beyond my scope. So I would look to an expert to tell us.
Yeah, I just don't, I don't think that just because we made it work and gotten away with not really apparently addressing advice from 10 years ago, I just don't think that that's okay. And so to get us,
I'm
and I'm not saying that you are, I'm not saying that you are.
But I'm saying that spending $32,000 on this is not going to fix that problem.
No, so I want to look at the students, I want to look at the staff and say, okay, we're absolutely sure this is what needs to be done from a safety standpoint, and I can't do that off the 2007 list. And even if we did go back to the list and we haven't addressed it, then shame on us on some of those key things. I'm just looking at it with fresh eyes, saying we got to just start in a small bite and see what we need to do, and then that can foster a broader conversation before other funds are spent. I don't see an open house changing teaching in the hallway. Some of the other issues, the bigger issue is, one of the bigger issues that we'll have to look at some point is that one of the classrooms meets the size requirement, one of them. I'm not even going there, I'm just thinking, the advice that we've gotten from different places on the front entrance and the safety and wandering through. I remember going there when our son was in 5th grade and going in, I was like, I could just wander around the whole school, this is crazy. So I'm professing my personal bias, I'm not speaking for anybody else here. We have to at least make sure that we're addressing those, and this seemed like the best way to try to leverage prior work and funding.
Right.
So we might never quite agree, but that's where I'm coming from.
Ed, you want to add in?
I would have to just go on the safety issue alone. If you just look compared to the schools of today compared to back in '07, just a simple fact, like you brought up, that once that door is buzzed, you lose that person. Nobody has eyes on anybody walking through that school, having to go up the stairs and go down the hall in order to meet somebody. And just that safety issue alone for our kids, I think, is something that's important to look at. And I think if you're looking back at 7 years to today, and different things under the safety end, which I have some knowledge in, that's concerning to me and the kids that are in the school. Just that one thing, watching the video.
And again, I want to be clear, it's not that I'm opposing this as a method of due diligence, but I want to be clear that spending this money isn't going to fix any of those problems. It'll identify, but then we'll have to come back and
And quite frankly, it could identify more problems.
Exactly.
You know, we could be opening up Pandora's box by asking harder questions to outside people that will ask the hard questions to our fire, the state fire, the DOE, and when they do their due diligence to report back to us. So yeah, we are aware that, I think we're aware that we may be opening up something we can't close back up again. We've been going along, getting along for quite a long time.
We have known problems that aren't being addressed, and we have multiple feedback mechanisms that were listed that are saying there's some problems here and they need to be addressed, and there's only so long you can keep kicking that can. So